This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Agriculture innovation never stops, and cotton takes center stage. Hello folks, welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. Thanks for taking the time to join us. The agriculture economy is very interconnected. Changes in one commodity impact the others up and down the supply chain. One area where those changes can be felt is in plant development. Max takes a look at just how the ripple effects reach out, sometimes in unexpected places.
Well, Mike, one can't help but think of the ripple effect through the agriculture economy, as at least grain producers now are doing a little bit better with the price improvement. The ripple effect that goes all the way from the agriculture retailers at the local level right down to the basic researchers who work in the laboratories and in the fields to make the crop inputs possible. We have an example this week. From the same company, two agronomists who work on the same crop, in this case, cotton.
What really gets me excited is developing a new product for the growers. I had an opportunity to grow up on a farm, and I like to make that connection between the scientist creating a new product and getting back to the farm. I've been here with BASF for 6 years. I love what I do. Every region's a little different, so we have to focus regionally on what to do, but we've got two discovery breeders. They develop markers that are connected to the DNA from the field, lab, and then to the farmer. We have to test everything that we have on the farmer's field, and we use that data to make selections. The key to staying ahead of what the farmers really need, innovation. What does that innovation look like? It's a holistic view. We start at the very beginning, make crosses between elite parents, but we also want to release something that the farmer's going to like. Yield potential is the key. And in cotton, fiber quality as well. Those parameters go hand in hand. That's what brings a grower or a farmer a profit. In BASF, we utilize the knowledge of everybody we have on the team, and we combine that to get a product for the farmer. And as we test it, we then narrow it down to a couple varieties that then the agronomic services could then start to look at these products that could possibly go commercial.
The Agronomic Services Group is a very diverse group. With BASF, the Agronomic Services role is to take the experimental varieties, take them out to the field, and we incorporate them in our agronomic performance trials. Those trials are farm trials that go across the cotton belt. We have growers that are growing in West Texas with very limited water, and then you have growers all the way in Georgia, of course, that are operating with heavy rainfall, and we're able to take those environments coupled with the growers' management styles. We're able to see how these new varieties are best going to fit on a given grower's operation. We're able to go from the trait development group, from the breeding group, and then take that information to the farmer's doorstep.
The doorstep then where you growers take the results of all of that work in the labs and in the fields to plant a crop that will produce hopefully in abundance and hopefully profitably, so that ripple effect moves right on through thousands of communities in cotton country of Texas and Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, many other states across America too, and what we call flyover country sometimes, but many of us would argue it's just as essential as our much vaunted metropolitan areas.
Thank you, Max. That ripple effect in the ag economy is certainly being noticed across the country in a variety of different commodities. And to help us understand them, we are joined by Dwayne Bossy of Bolt Marketing. Dwayne, this past week, volatility has been the watchword in the markets. Last Friday's sell-off coupled with this week's recovery. Where do we go from here in the soybean market?
Oh yeah, the soybean market next week, I'm going to be watching South America very closely, which I know we've always seemed to be watching South America closely, but why I am is because harvest is just starting in Brazil, and they don't have the old stocks, the old ending stocks to ship out right now, so they're waiting on this new crop, right? And so is China. Boats are starting to line up in the ports ready for this harvest, which is already delayed a little bit by rain. If they have more rain in Brazil, and then there's rumors of a trucker strike happening, if they can't get these new beans out of the field into the ports quickly, there's a chance that some of these boats start floating back up to the U.S. and buy beans from us that, frankly, Mike, I'm not sure if we have a lot available, but there is some trade talk that there could be 140 million bushels that could shift from Brazil to the U.S. if this all plays out next week.
Well, let's talk about timing on how a playout like this would be shaped. Of course, as you mentioned, harvest first week of February typically gets started, but they were late planted this year, Dwayne. When does the trade expect the bulk of Brazilian soybeans to start making their way to the ports?
It's probably going to be more in that February time frame. Yeah, right now we're expecting in January throughout this month, of course, which is now ended, but Brazil only shipped about 1/4 of the beans they normally do in January. So there wasn't really much of an early crop. So yeah, February is where it's really going to hit the market. But the trade is already anticipating, just because of logistics, muddy roads, they're going to be behind normal pace, which, depending on China's demand, maybe that's not a big deal. But the way they seem to be so hungry for soybeans right now, I think it's going to be a big deal for China. And if they change many of those purchases from Brazil to the U.S. again, we just don't have a lot of beans to offer to them. This could get pretty violent next week, actually.
You know, it certainly could, and it's certainly gotten violent over the past 4 months at different times as these markets have rallied and receded. Given this week's move, the push we've had back towards last week's high, Dwayne, I mean, does this give you a lot of confidence from a technical perspective that there's more upside yet in particularly old crop soybeans?
Well, that's what we're doing here a little bit this last week. We've had a lot of volatility, like you mentioned. You know, we had the market pull back rather sharply. And when you look at the technicals, you're overbought. You see some areas that could use some trade because there wasn't a lot of trade as you shot higher. The technicals kind of point towards a larger pullback. But then when I talk fundamentals in Brazil, you know, not having the beans to ship and China being hungry, the fundamentals say we need to scream higher. I don't think we've done a good enough job rationing demand yet, Mike. And so the fundamentals scream one thing, technicals maybe say another. Until we can poke through and make new highs in that March soybean contract, the technicals lean a little negative to me. But once we do poke through that, then you got technicals and fundamentals both bullish. We could be to 15 in a hurry.
Well, now let's talk about what that means for growers. Of course, a lot of folks around the country are sitting down, they're making their acreage plans, they're getting their inputs bought, they're really deciding and setting in stone what happens with their new crop rotation, new crop soybean prices. How should guys be handling that given the volatility?
Oh, I think the same as most years. I think you do your scale up selling, but because of this bullish situation we have and the need to add, 7 to 9 million acres of beans in the U.S. with the drought monitor the way it is, I think the scale up selling, you have those scales pretty wide apart. For example, I started around that 1150 area futures, and then my next sale is 1250. That sounds like a huge gap. In a normal year, it is, Mike, but this year, I think that's okay. You scale them up wide ranges, but you still sell for a profit, Mike. I mean, that's really what the bank wants me to do, I know.
100%. That's what bankers love to see. Well, folks, we'll be back. There's a lot more market action to discuss, whether we're talking corn or wheat or the livestock markets. So we'll dig into that with Dwayne here in just a second. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff. Tips, videos, how-tos, and more. If it has to do with ag tech, you'll find it in the Tech Tool Shed, your unbiased one-stop resource. And we're talking markets with Dwayne Bossy of Bolt Marketing. And Dwayne, the corn market going nuts. Thursday, we saw corn in the May contracts rise above their previous contract high. That's got to be a good sign.
It is a great sign. Following the news of these USDA export sales announcements at 8 o'clock, over the last week, we've had over like 140 million bushels in flash sales, mostly all to China and unknown. So maybe it's all China. I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical when we started talking about China buying this much corn from us. I was kind of let's wait and see if it happens. Oh, here it is. There's a lot of market talk talking about our ending stocks being 1.1 billion bushels. And I thought, wow, guys, that's talking about China coming in and buying 300, 400 million bushels. But hey, they just bought 140 in the last week. So maybe I need to get on board with this. And corn market looks very bullish right now. It's
also interesting. There were reports out this past week that China has made fairly substantial purchases of American ethanol for really the first time in history. What's going on there, Dwayne?
Yeah, their largest purchase here ever from us, and actually usually it equals what they buy for an entire year, and they did it in one purchase. So, very good for the ethanol plants that are struggling, of course, with high-priced corn and lower-priced fuel. This is exactly what we need. We need to export the ethanol out of here. So that's great. How much more happens? I have no clue. That's really hard to nail down in China how much. They just seem to be hungry for all commodities in general right now, which is great for the U.S. farmer.
You know, it certainly is. And Dwayne, that U.S. farmer has been making aggressive cash sales of their old crop supplies for the past 4 or 5 months, really since combines started to roll. For those guys who maybe made some sales early and now they're looking back with regret, they're perhaps their lowest price sales of the year, and they want to make some more sales, but gosh, there could be some upside. How are growers handling that? Call options were very popular. Are they still a good way to re-own?
There's a lot of question and intrigue about call options, but like you've mentioned, the volatility in this market is so high, and with high market volatility becomes a high premium in call options. So like a May at the money call option right now is about 35 cents as of this taping here. So they're pretty high priced. So a lot of guys back off then, because you don't want to buy a call option for 35 cents and just lose that on that previous sale that you're maybe feeling bad about. But remember, if you sold for a profit, you did really well. I don't know if I'm that crazy interested in buying corn back at these levels. If you have some pullback on some sort of negative China news or negative stock market news, then you can buy it back. But buying at the highs after you've disappointed in a previous sale, I don't know if I can advise that right here.
Gotcha. Well, the other feed grains, wheat, has certainly been kind of laying in the background. It's been taking its cues from corn and soybeans. Could wheat have a story developing?
You know, we could. When you look at wheat, usually the story I go back to is, yep, we got a little tiny bullish story, but world stocks are record high. And that's true again. According to USDA right now, world stocks are record high, but you got Russia banning exports, Ukraine trying to curb exports. Argentina now talked this week of curbing wheat exports. If we have all this record supply, why is everyone hoarding it? So I kind of wonder if wheat doesn't have a story that it can laying in the weeds here that may spike wheat up later on if we find out we don't have as much wheat out there in the world as we thought.
And Dwayne, before we let you go, cattle market next week, going higher, going lower? What do you think?
You know, we could have a little bit of a pullback technically. We got through that 120 resistance in the April board up to that 123. We might pull back to that 120 to retest that support. And then after that, we're going to go see 125.
All right, things to keep an eye on. Dwayne Bossy, Bolt Marketing, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this week.
Anytime. Thank you, guys.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
It's often said that agriculture is at the mercy of Mother Nature, and that's very true for producers across this country. However, Chad Colby digs into some technology that may be coming down the line that may make us a little less reliant on that Mother Nature.
When I was growing up, my dad always was looking for that next 10 bushel. Hi everyone, I'm Chad Colby, and on this week's tech segment, I am so excited because what if I told you over the next handful of years, you could find 50 bushel an acre on your farm? I've got a special guest with me to talk about some new technology. Joining me this week is Greg Sauter as he rolls out a completely new product to maybe help you find that 50 bushel on your farm.
Well, you're right, Chad. You know, over the years, we've done a lot with pivots and drip irrigation, but at the same time, when I saw how the corn yields responded to the right amount of nitrogen at the right time at the right place with white drop, we said to ourselves, let's go after water, putting down nutrients of water and see the response. Biggest thing in our operation is the one big stick we can't control is Mother Nature. And I think for farmers to get comfortable taking populations a bit higher would be the fact to know that without a doubt, they have with 360 rain the capability to come in and put every week water down right next to that plant, banning it, and the efficiency goes up on water per yield ratio, but the main thing is it gives everybody that comfort that we can swing for the fences as prices start to go higher.
So Greg, let's talk a little bit more in detail. Certainly one of the biggest challenges with any irrigation system is the availability of water. Your system is putting water at the base of the plant. So is it safe to assume it's going to use a lot less water?
Well, there's no question. Our goal is to raise more yield with 40% less water than, like, say, a pivot irrigation would have. And what we've found the last 2 years, that definitely rings true. I started out saying very boldly, we're going to go for 50 bushel in this 5-year design period. If in the first 2, we went over 50 bushel. This year we hit 65. So we're really excited about the response that we have seen by putting water at the base of the plant.
So Greg, you talked to a lot of producers when you developed this new product. What were some of the questions you got from producers and how did you address them?
Well, you know, we had 31 top growers come in this summer in 3 different groups and spend a day with us in the rain in the field. And the exciting thing was they quickly got it. It's just not an irrigation system. A lot of them said, this looks like a plant butler. In other words, at the speeds we're going, all of a sudden you start thinking about camera technology and whether it's fungicides, herbicides, insecticides. A lot of the organic growers that came in this summer were really excited about the fact, can we lay manure down in growing season? Think that that does for manure management and how well we can get nutrient value out of that manure.
Greg, I'm interested to learn more about your rollout plan. I know over the last several years you've had these machines running. In fact, you have one running in Florida right now. Can you share a little bit more about your go-to-market strategy? Because it's going to take a little time.
Well, the rollout will be, next year we're going to have 6 units running here in this area. Then we're going to move to, in 2022, we're going to move to 20 units in multiple states, and then full sales in 2023. And by that time, we hope to have, you know, a lot of the nitty-gritty done, but we're excited about where it's running now. I mean, this is an autonomous machine. It's laying hose out and picking hose up every place it goes. It comes from the center well, and that hose is being laid down, and it's really exciting when you see the capability and the smarts that this machine has. I'm certainly looking forward to keeping an eye on this machine in 2021, and I'll be sure to keep you posted. And don't worry, I'll find Greg Sauter this fall like I've done many years in the past and riding the combine, and we'll check on those results. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It's incredible to think that it might not be too many more years and we will see autonomous tractors out there across the countryside, around the world. Incredible stuff, incredible technology coming out of agricultural innovation. And don't go away, we've got a lot more features of technology. We'll be taking a look at the flow rate seed firmer later on in the program and the Balzer Field Floater 7. So stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness. Earlier this week, a massive snowstorm covered much of the Corn Belt, and the snow was falling outside, and it got me thinking I just want to lay in my chair and read a good book. But where do you find a good book? Well, Max Armstrong has an answer for us.
Mike, we don't often do book reviews, but we made an exception in this instance because it's a very interesting book that I think many farmers and ranchers will want to see, and many consumers too. It's called Resetting the Table, Straight Talk about the food we grow and eat. Robert Parlberg, the author, joins us here to talk about it. Robert, you are a farm policy, public food policy expert, are you not? That's your area of expertise.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing for my academic career and my consulting career.
You probably have been frustrated, as have many of us in and around agriculture, about all of the misconceptions out there. And it appears from your book, you just go right down the line one after another and take them on head on, exploding some of those myths that are out there. Give us number one on your list.
Well, out where I live in Massachusetts, not much is said in favor of modern agriculture. The word is that modern agriculture is responsible for our obesity crisis, for polluting our water, for accelerating climate change, for torturing animals, for shredding the fabric of rural society. It goes on and on and on. And I teach these subjects, and I know there's not a lot of good evidence in support of any of those accusations. So I got tired of listening to it and decided to just write a book about it.
Your argument in most instances, I gather, is science-based, correct?
Yeah, I stick to the evidence. Maybe it's because it's on my side. But you can, for example, organically grown foods. Everyone assumes that everyone's been told that they're more nutritious and safer to eat than conventionally grown foods, but there's no good scientific evidence to support that. Everybody's told that genetically modified foods are unsafe, but if you look at what's been said by all of the science academies in the world, including in Europe, they say they can find no good evidence of any new risks to human health or the environment from any of the GMOs that have been put on the market so far. But of course, scientific evidence isn't enough to persuade people to change their mind. We've seen that time and time again.
Isn't part of the problem we don't necessarily believe science anymore? I mean, there seem to be so many people who question the science or don't buy into the scientific argument the way maybe our parents did all of those years ago.
Well, that's an interesting point because when it comes to COVID, progressive thinkers are saying we've got to follow the science. When it comes to climate change, progressive thinkers are saying we've got to follow the science. But when it comes to food and agriculture, they bail out and they embrace an ideal that is, I think, in many ways pre-modern and pre-scientific. They want farms to be small, non-specialized, local, chemical-free, organic. This is the way agriculture used to be before the scientific revolution of the 20th century. So people are very selective about the kind of science they embrace.
Some farmers and ranchers have carved very successful niches in some of these areas of misunderstanding. I think, for example, of local farming. I think, for example, of organic production. Some people are doing well there on the farm, aren't they?
Well, they are, and I'm all for that. I believe in multi-agriculturalism. I don't want one style of agriculture. Most of the farms in America today, defined as farms by the USDA, produce very little food, but they're an important part of rural society. Like 85% of the food that we produce comes from only 8 or 9% of our farms. The others are retirement farms, lifestyle farms, hobby farms, part-time farms, and I'm for all of it. I think it's terrific. But we got to be careful about assuming too much when it comes to new trends. Local food has been heavily promoted now for almost 2 decades. But if you add up all of the farm sales made through farmers markets or roadside stands or pick your own or directly to restaurants, add it all up together, and it's less than 1% of all farm sales. Instead of becoming more local, our food system's still becoming more global. In 1990, only 11% of our food was imported. Now it's 19%.
Some would argue, Bob, that's bad. They would say, wait a minute, we're becoming so dependent upon other countries, but it does give us an amazing variety, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you want to eat fresh fruits and vegetables in the winter months, you better believe in globalization. The United States now imports half of its fresh fruit consumption. We import 1/3 of our fresh vegetable consumption. I think that's been fantastic for the availability of healthy foods in the marketplace. I wouldn't want to go back to the kind of diet we had before we had access to tropical products and Southern Hemisphere products in the winter months.
Straight talk. Resetting the table. Straight talk about the food we grow and eat. I think many folks reading your book will find it refreshing that here's somebody weighing in on the side of common sense and science. And there it is, right there. How do folks find it, Robert?
Well, you can get it on Amazon. It'll be for sale beginning February 2nd. My agent told me I had to make sure to say the title at least 3 times. Instead of doing that, I'm going to hold it up.
I think I will have said it 3 times if I say it one more time. Resetting the table. Straight talk about the food we grow and eat. Thank you, Robert Powerberg. We appreciate it.
Great. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Max. A good topic, certainly something that is being discussed both around dinner tables and in Washington, D.C. Check that out. Find it on Amazon on February 2nd.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Ordinarily, when the snow flies, we see a lot of grain farmers retire to their machine sheds to make some improvements and some repairs on their planting equipment before they get rolling. Well, This week, we are talking to David Jolly. He's the product manager over at Herschel Parts, and they have a new tool that growers really need to take a look at as they're working on their planters. David, bring us up to speed. What do you guys have out for farmers this year?
We are the distributor for the Flow-Right seed firmer. With that, it's a newer technology that is a better item out there on the products for the replacement for a competitor that's been out there for years. With that, we have several advantages. One of those is we have a replaceable wear pad on ours. That is due because we have a memory polymer that will allow us to keep the rigidity and even pressure on the seed. And that way you're able to replace this bottom 2 to 3 times before you have to replace the firmer itself. So you're able to reduce your input costs after you once purchase the product.
Absolutely. And David, when you're thinking about making replacements, how long, what's the lifespan do you anticipate of those parts that can eventually be replaced?
Depending upon the planter size as well as your soil types, we've had some customers get 2,000, 3,000 acres out of these. A lot of it depends upon your planter size as well as your seed in soil types, and as well as your farming practices, whether you're doing no-till or minimum till or full tillage.
Absolutely. And as growers are looking to make this change to their planter, what else is going to be required on their part? Is it just the same as swapping any other seed firmer? You're just able to put in some new technology?
With ours, they will fit into the competitors' brackets. Otherwise, we do have our own brackets as well that are a lot heavier. They have a lifetime guarantee on them. One thing with our brackets is you do have adjustability to where you can adjust that. We'll give you a starting point of where to put that firmer on at. But then as every farm's different, you can have adjustment of if you want less pressure, more pressure, you're able to make those adjustments on your farm to your needs.
Incredible. Now, David, Herschel Parts is the distributor. Tell us a little bit about Herschel Parts. Where are you guys located?
We're in Indianola, Iowa. We've been in business for over 135 years. We specialize in cutting and tillage products that are built here, as well as sourcing other products from all over the world. We go through a dealer network as well as have a small retail division as well.
And for growers who are interested in making this upgrade on their planters, what's the best way to get a hold of a Flow-Right seed firmer?
Get on HerschelParts.com, or they can call our phone number as well.
Fantastic. Folks, check that out, HERSCHEL parts.com for the Flow-Right seed firmer.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not.
Well, it's time to talk weather, and after a quiet fall pattern, Greg, things certainly seem to be getting a little bit more active. What's coming in across the West Coast this week?
Literally from a drought to a flood, way too much. Hopefully some of the valley locales, the main ag interest, have made it through okay farther south into California. Of course, this wetter, more active pattern in the Pacific Northwest ongoing for much of the fall and obviously into the wintertime season. And it continues on here with pieces of cold, the cold air kind of moderating and modifying as you venture east of the divide, but nonetheless a couple of weather systems on the move into the first half of the week. Gusty winds, mountain snow, lower elevation rain, and still a series of these disturbances making their way from northwest to southeast across the Pacific Northwest, re-energizing on a puff and rush of milder air. And of course, Big Sky Country, the Western Dakotas continue to see that snowpack build, ease on down, and continue to build, so no shortage of moisture there. Into California, the big headlines there throughout mountain areas. Tahoe, blizzard last week, flooding, excess rains upwards of 1.5 feet into some valley locales, wind and dust across the desert southwest, and the systems and the pattern continues on here, kind of easing up in intensity as the week wears on, but very little change for the end part of the week. New low pressure spins down through the southern plains, more rain and snow across the plains, drought easing there as well as the next weather system comes ashore across coastal sections of California.
Now across the Corn Belt, Greg, last week we saw a lot of folks get their first substantial snowfall of 2021. Is more on the way.
More is on the way. You wanted moisture, right? You didn't say what kind you wanted, but you got it. And hopefully with still some relatively mild grounds, we'll be able to absorb some of that snow melt. And they'll be back and forth between snow melt and adding to it with that weekend storm system generating additional snows for the Great Lakes region, ultimately into the northeast of New England. At least for now, the bitter cold, with the exception of some cold last week in in the Corn Belt remains up to the north, with the next weather system tracking a little farther to the north and northwest, drawing in milder air. Watch the snow melt getting going here. Rain on top of that, and who knows, over the southern Corn Belt with time, a couple of showers and thunderstorms. So up and down on temperatures, but the moisture pattern certainly continues on. Of course, we've had severe weather in the southern plains, Gulf Coast areas with this weak disturbance out of the Ohio Valley. Note the extension of the jet stream all the way down into the Rio Grande, where we've had some recent snows as far south as El Paso, back into New Mexico. Organized snowfall there, rain and snow in the southern plains, and showers and thunderstorms over the late portion of the week across the Lone Star State, and once again over the waterlogged areas of the Delta later in the week too.
Now, Greg, that previous map showed the jet stream coming south and moving back north. Will that be bringing moisture up into the northwest or northeast part of the country?
It will, with a series of storms on the move. Here's this one across the Ohio Valley, swinging into the northeast New England, and significant winter storm conditions and heavy snow for the northeast of New England early in the week. Note the lack of any 1-2 punch. The second punch, Arctic air, remains up towards the Sioux and areas of the far northern plains. Somewhat colder, more seasonal air will follow in behind that winter storm over the northeast of New England. Back to milder weather. This will be a significant moisture maker over the western Corn Belt, including snow melt by the end portion of the week. One weather system off to the north and east. How about that snow into North Carolina there, Max? Last week, the showers and thunderstorms over the dry soils of Florida. Note low pressure down across the Big Bend of Texas begins to lift back into areas of the Red River Valley of the South. Cool, dry weather for the end part of the week with a frost freeze potential here, but later in the week, showers and thunderstorms will be on the move west to east, and the propensity as well late in the week for additional rounds of heavy and severe weather.
Now, Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country. Presented by Pivot Bio Proven. Visit pivotbio.com to find a representative near you.
Well, Greg, the maps highlighted some additional precipitation in this coming week. Who's going to get the bulk of it?
Now, we'll just say who's not. Probably the northern plains, the far upper Midwestern areas of the country, at least in relation to the run of winter storms that have made it their way across the west, across the deep south, into the northeast and New England. There'll be some degree of snowfall up towards the southern Canadian prairie. Those folks as well over the past few weeks, a little bit lacking in snowfall. But here it is, Pacific Northwest, Central Rockies again, across a good part of the northern and western Corn Belt. Here's your corridor of additional snows. Later in the week, watch for some runoff and melt on top of what's going to go on moisture-wise here in the western complex. And look at the rain and thunderstorm activity. It may rain this week in the central and southern Corn Belt later in the week in particular. Severe weather in this part of the country. The moisture backing off a little into California, but building northward into the Pacific Northwest.
And now, Greg, the week after, of course, takes us to Valentine's Day. Will I be taking my sweetheart to plow some snow?
Well, that's a good way to put it, I guess. It's perhaps a sweet forecast here. Not idyllic, a little bit on a colder than average note. Pacific Northwest, up near the Canadian border into the northeast of New England. Nothing bitter cold for now, and some warmth, if you will, relative to wintertime over the southern plains and the eastern half of the country. That compaction of air masses, though, usually breeds a strong jet stream. Northern California back into the moisture pattern. Pacific Northwest, snows are back in the forecast for the northern plains. Upper Midwest down across the Ohio Valley, drying out where we need it, maybe. Southern plains and across still parts of the southwestern sections of the country lacking in moisture there.
And now the week of February 15th to the 21st, what do you see developing?
As we see it right now, that cold air begins to build and buckle on southward. You get this U-shaped configuration, the main trough here across the plains swinging into the Ohio Valley. So there's warmth relative to wintertime here. The cold air is bitter and biting. It hasn't really penetrated all that far south a good part of the wintertime season. Seeing in this late week stages of winter, it will begin to do so, and it is a stormy weather pattern, not in much of central and southern California, back in the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies over these drought-ridden areas, and we will add the snowpack again back into play over the plains and Corn Belt locales into the northeast of New England, precip about normal down across the southeastern sections of the country.
And now that final week of February, what do you see as we get ready to head into March?
You think we're getting ready for meteorological springtime, beginning part of March? Nah, here's the cold and laying on out. This is maybe a little snapshot of what's coming down here in the weeks and the next couple of months to come for the Corn Belt planting operations as well. And it's a wet and stormy weather pattern from the Pacific Northwest throughout much of the plains, Corn Belt areas and points to the east.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
At Max's Tractor Shed this weekend, we ponder the question, would you haul your antique farm tractor a few states away? A few hundred miles to be at a tractor event? We know people who do. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store-Lock Tool Cabinets. Made in America quality, the best tool cabinet you'll ever buy. Look at what they have to sell at StoreLock.com, then call them. They'll answer your questions. Oh, and be sure and tell them Max sent you. I was doing some reminiscing the other day, but the founder and president of RFD TV, Patrick Gotch, we were recalling that splendid weekend in 2012, 8.5 years ago, when antique tractor lovers brought their tractors together, about 1,000 altogether, to set a record for the Guinness Book of World Records for tractors moving around the track at one time. Joe Gangwish and I handled the play-by-play on RFD TV of that action. One thing I remember, some people hauled tractors from 6 states away. Well, it's not at all unusual for folks to travel a significant distance. As I found last summer, I caught up with Gerald and Carolyn Young. They hauled their Farm All H, a 1950 H, all the way from Hernando, Mississippi to Illinois. They had the flags on it, the American flag there, and flags for the armed forces, and also they had their umbrella to provide some shade from the sun. They hauled that tractor all the way from Hernando, Mississippi, some 450 miles. Well, let's find out what's going to happen at the first Big Iron auction of the new month. Mark Stock, our correspondent, checks in with a weekly report. Mark?
Well, Max, the February 3rd Big Iron online auction features outstanding equipment, including Bruce Rocole's retirement items out of Exeter, Nebraska. He has a 2012 Case IH Maxim 110 mechanical front tractor and a loader, only 220 hours. He's got a 2006 Case IH 2388 combine. He's got a Case IH 8920 tractor as well. Cass Hills Farm LLC out of Anamosa, Iowa, will be selling a Case IH Puma 195 tractor. They've got a Case IH 5230 mechanical front tractor and loader, plus they've got a Case IH Steiger 335 tractor as well. Myers Brothers out of Lynn, Kansas features a John Deere 9770 bullet rotor combine. Agrisales USA Inc. out of Montgomery, New York will sell a John Deere 7930 mechanical front tractor, only 4,400 hours. Plus they have two 2014 Mack CXU 613 tandem axle day cab trucks, super sharp. Larry Christensen out of Kennebec, South Dakota will sell an Apache AS710 self-propelled sprayer. Peterson Farms out of Bertrand, Nebraska, they've got a John Deere 9470 RT track tractor with only 3,300 hours. Great equipment selling February the 3rd. Max, we are filling our March auction calendar right now. Please reach out to your Big Iron rep if you've got equipment to sell.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide, we stand for you.
This week, as we continue our salute to FFA, we are getting to know the Illinois State Officer Team. And joining us now is Molly Schemp. Molly, you are the Illinois State Vice President. Tell us a little bit about your background in FFA. What got you involved?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. What got me involved in FFA, and I'm sure you've heard this answer before, but it really was my mom. My mom was an FFA member all 4 years of her high school career, and being a homeschooled student, I had to ask a local public school to join FFA, and so I attended their ag classes, became an FFA member, and got to wear a jacket that says Olympia, just like my mom's FFA jacket did.
That is very cool. And while you were in FFA, of course, you participated in a lot of different programs. Tell us a little bit about what you did in your high school experience with FFA.
Sure. So through FFA, one of my favorite things to do were career development events. I really enjoyed the public speaking CDEs, and especially the parliamentary procedure one. That was a fun team event to get to do with my fellow members. But I also really enjoyed getting to do things on the chapter level, like selling pork chops with the FFA alumni, and we have Feed the Farmers in the fall. And that was always fun to get to do stuff with the community.
It is good to get out and shake folks' hands and meet them. As State Vice President, I imagine in a regular year that would be a big part of your job, but we're virtual this year. What are you doing as State VP?
This year, with it being virtual, we've gotten to be really creative in how we're engaging with members. And one example, something I'm really excited about that's coming up, is our Ground Zero Conference. So as Major State Officers this year, we got to create curriculum and put together a conference for over 600 members next month. And I'm really excited to get to engage with them.
Fantastic. Molly Schemp, Illinois State Vice President, thank you so much.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
It's been a while since you and I have been able to get together for several reasons, politically and personally. For example, I've announced my retirement, but I'm not going to stop talking about agriculture, and Max is letting me do that on This Week in Agribusiness. But let's talk about the questions that you are raising. What's going to happen to agricultural policy under the new administration? And what's going to happen to trade agreements under a new administration? Those are questions I can't answer, but ultimately we'll find out, because it will happen. One of the things that bothers me, however, is Congress spending time on impeachment discussions rather than policy and writing new rules and regulations. That's why it's going to be more important than ever that you as agricultural people, farmers, ranchers, food producers, stay in touch with your congressman, because we do have a familiar face back in the Secretary's office, but not a familiar face as chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. Colin Peterson lost the election for his district, and so he'll no longer be chairman of the House Ag Committee, and he does understand agriculture. What about trade agreements? What about phase 1, phase 2, and so on of the China-U.S. trade agreement? What will happen with that? We'll have to wait and find out. But make sure you let members of Congress know what you think is important in the new agriculture bill that has to be completed in 2 years. So you have a lot of work to do. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and hope that we get what we need in the world of agriculture. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Springtime may be around the corner, but harvest will be here before we know it. And then the question turns to, how do we get the grain out of the field? Well, the Farm Progress Virtual Experience has several examples. Right here's the Balzer Field Floater 7.
The Balzer Field Floater 7 grain cart. The Balzer Field Floater 7 grain cart with triple axles provides the maneuverability you've come to love with a tired unit, but with the flotation of a track unit. With 6 10-50-50 R32 tires, you can float through the field with minimum disruption to the ground. And it gives you the ability to get through even the wettest conditions. Farmers can have an uncompromised grain cart that pulls easier through any condition in order to make sure all of your combines keep running. The 24-inch unload auger still has the fastest unload rate in the industry at 1,090 bushels a minute. Meaning the trucks are loaded faster so you can get back in the field faster. There are now over 20 different grain cart configurations to make sure each farmer gets the perfect machine for the job. Stop over at balzerinc.com to find the best grain cart for you.
And that's just one of the videos available for the Farm Progress virtual experience this year. You can see all 100 videos at farmprogressshow.com. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us this week. We wish you the very best, and we look forward to seeing you next week for This Week in Agribusiness. Take care, everyone.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.